Hi, Guy. Tonight we journey back to ancient Persia, to the heart of Persepolis, where the jewel-encrusted throne room shimmers under the setting sun. Imagine it, the glint of gold, the deep reds and blues of lapis lazuli and carnelian, all catching the last rays of the day. It's breathtaking, truly. But don't get too lost in the beauty because, well, let's just say things are about to get interesting. You probably won't survive the night if you aren't careful, with all the political scheming and backstabbing, and I do mean literal backstabbing, going on around the court. Paranoia is practically a perfume in this place. Everyone's vying for power, whispering secrets, and eyeing each other with suspicion. You have to watch your back here, every single second. So, before you get comfortable, nestled into your favorite spot with your beverage of choice. Hot tea, cold brew, maybe something a little stronger? Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure whatsoever. And hey, while you're at it, please let us know where you're watching from and what time it is locally. I love hearing from you guys. It makes this whole experience feel so much more connected. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes for a moment, breathe in deep, and imagine. You trudge through the crowded streets of Persepolis. The city teems with life. Merchants jostle you, their voices a clamoring mix of gossip and trade. Haggling is an art form here. You can practically feel the energy crackling in the air. You hear snippets of conversations, rumors about the king, the latest military campaign, and of course, the ever-present whispers of courtly intrigue. And the smells. Oh, the smells. Did you know they used to make sunscreen from crocodile dung? No joke. Historians found evidence of it in ancient texts. Apparently, it was quite effective, but I'm not sure about the fragrance. Anyway, moving on. The scent of roasting lamb, marinated in pomegranate and spices, mixes with the dust kicked up by passing chariots. Speaking of chariots, did you know there's a theory that some of them had little cup holders for their airag? Airag is fermented mare's milk, sort of like an ancient alcoholic milkshake. I know, it sounds a bit unusual, and the cup holder theory is definitely fringe, but stay with me. Imagine these dignitaries, bumping along in their chariots, sipping on their airag. Makes you wonder what kind of road rage they experienced, right? You continue your journey, the palace looming larger with every step. It's an imposing structure, a testament to the power and wealth of the Persian Empire. You approach the massive gates of the palace, intricately carved with scenes of royal processions and mythical creatures. Soldiers clad in gleaming armor eye you suspiciously. They're not particularly friendly, and for good reason. Historically accurate. They used to think left-handed people were spies. Something about being associated with the god of darkness, I think. So if you happen to be left-handed, maybe just keep that hand tucked away for now. You finally manage to convince them you're not a threat. A little well-placed flattery goes a long way, and you're ushered through a series of courtyards, each more opulent than the last. Fountains splash, exotic birds flit through the gardens, and everywhere you look there are signs of unimaginable wealth. Finally, you reach the entrance to the throne room. Picture this. The vast hall, pillars reaching towards a ceiling painted with celestial scenes. Torches flicker, casting dancing shadows on the walls. And at the far end, on a raised platform, sits King Xerxes, reclining on his magnificent, jewel-encrusted throne. He's surrounded by courtiers, all vying for his attention, their faces a mask of carefully controlled emotions. The air is thick with the scent of incense and something else. A hint of danger, perhaps? As you find a spot amongst the throng, trying your best to blend in and avoid drawing unwanted attention, a hush falls over the crowd. A storyteller, his face weathered with age and wisdom, steps forward. He bows low before the king and then turns to address the assembled guests. The air is thick with anticipation for his rendition of Nineveh's dramatic fall. It's a well-known tale, of course, but this storyteller is legendary. He's known for his dramatic flair, his ability to transport his audience to another time and place. Spoiler alert. It's going to be epic, even if a little exaggerated. Let's just say he takes some liberties with historical accuracy, but that's part of the charm. So settle in, guys, because the story is about to begin. And remember, in this world of ancient intrigue, anything can happen. Stay alert, and who knows? You might just survive the night. The air crackled with anticipation. Dust motes danced in the flickering lamplight as the storyteller, His voice, a low rumble, began to weave his tale. He spoke of Nineveh, a name that echoed with the ghosts of grandeur, once the mightiest city in all of Assyria, a glittering jewel in the crown of the ancient world. Its library, he claimed, was a wonder, holding within its walls the collected wisdom of ages, scrolls filled with secrets whispered from the very dawn of time. He described walls so colossal they scraped the belly of the sky, their shadows stretching across the city like the fingers of giants. Within those formidable defenses lay a city teeming with life. Markets overflowed with exotic goods, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon, cloves, and frankincense. Silks shimmered like captured rainbows, their vibrant hues a testament to the city's far-reaching trade routes. He even hinted, with a mischievous glint in his eye, at a brisk trade in, well, let's just say exotic pets, the kind that might flick their tongues at you. Whether such creatures actually graced the homes of Nineveh's elite, who can truly say? The storyteller paused, drawing a slow breath, his gaze sweeping across the captivated faces of his listeners. He spoke then of the Tigris, the lifeblood of the city, its waters reflecting the sun like a ribbon of molten gold. This mighty river, he explained, was the source of Nineveh's prosperity, connecting it to a vast network of trade routes that stretched across the known world. But this blessing, he warned, was a double-edged sword. For while the river brought wealth and power, it also attracted the envious eyes of covetous neighbors. Even now, historians argue whether Nineveh's location on this vital artery of commerce was its greatest asset, or the very thing that sealed its doom. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. He spoke of whispers carried on the wind, whispers of an impending storm gathering on the horizon. The Medes and the Persians, once disparate tribes, had united under a single banner, a single, ambitious king. King Cyaxares, the storyteller, pronounced the name with a mixture of awe and dread, a man forged in the fires of war, a leader who dreamt of an empire that would stretch from the mountains to the sea. And Nineveh, in all its splendor, stood directly in his path. The storyteller's words conjured vivid images in the minds of his audience. They could almost see Cyaxares' army, a vast, relentless tide of warriors, their numbers seemingly endless. He described their armor, polished to a blinding sheen, reflecting the desert sun like 1,000 burning embers. He spoke of their discipline, their unwavering loyalty to their king, their thirst for conquest. Of course, the storyteller, being a storyteller, perhaps embellished the truth a little. One imagines the reality of a long campaign was rather less glamorous. Dusty, sunburnt men, their armor probably scratched and dented rather than gleaming like fire. But a good story needs a little embellishment, doesn't it? He recounted the siege, the relentless pounding of battering rams against the city's mighty walls, the desperate cries of defenders, the hiss of burning arrows arcing through the sky. He painted a picture of a city under siege, its once vibrant markets now deserted, its streets filled with the debris of war. The very air, he claimed, was thick with fear. The fall of Nineveh, he explained, was a tragedy of epic proportions, a stark reminder of the fragility of even the greatest empires. Its destruction resonated through the ages, a cautionary tale whispered from generation to generation. And as the storyteller's voice finally faded into the stillness of the night, his audience was left to ponder the fate of this once great city, a city that had vanished beneath the sands of time, leaving behind only whispers and legends. The echoes of its glory and the lament of its fall lingered in the air like the haunting strains of a forgotten melody. The low rumble started like a distant earthquake, a tremor in the earth that vibrated up through the soles of your sandals. It grew, slowly, steadily, into a deep, pulsing throb that seemed to resonate in your very bones. The drums of war. Cyaxares' army was here. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of Median soldiers, a sea of bronze and leather, had surrounded Nineveh, a noose tightening around the great city's neck. And those drums, the sound was unsettling, almost inhuman. Some whisper, and it's a truly disturbing whisper, that they're made of stretched human skin taken from conquered enemies. Yikes. Just thinking about it sends a shiver down your spine. Imagine the sound those drums would make, throbbing with the stolen lives of their victims, announcing the coming doom. The sun, a blazing eye in the dust-choked sky, reflects off the tips of thousands of spears, a chillingly beautiful spectacle. Nineveh, the jewel of the Assyrian Empire, is now a caged animal surrounded by predators. The siege has begun. The first arrows, a dark cloud against the bright sky, arc over the city walls. They fall like deadly rain, thudding into wood and stone, some finding their marks in the unfortunate souls caught in the open. The air is thick with the twang of bowstrings and the cries of men. Just how long this siege will last, nobody really knows. Some historians say it was a quick, decisive victory, a matter of weeks. Others claim it was a drawn-out affair, lasting months, maybe even years, slowly grinding the city down. Who's right? The scrolls are vague, the stories contradictory. All we know for sure is that this is just the beginning. Look closer. See the defenders scrambling on the walls, their faces grim and determined. They're a mix of seasoned soldiers, hardened veterans of countless campaigns, and ordinary citizens, men and women, young and old, now forced to take up arms. Fear flickers in their eyes, but it's overshadowed by a fierce resolve. These are the people of Nineveh, famed throughout the ancient world for their tenacity, their unwavering loyalty to their city, their willingness to fight to the death. Remember the stories of their past victories, their ruthless efficiency in war? Now that same ferocity is turned inwards, focused on defending their homes, their families, their very lives. A young boy, no older than 10, struggles to lift a shield almost as tall as himself. His small hands, still soft and uncalloused, grip the rim tightly. Beside him, his father, a burly blacksmith with soot-stained arms, adjusts the boy's helmet, his touch gentle despite the chaos around them. He whispers words of encouragement, a father's desperate plea for courage in the face of unimaginable fear. A woman, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, pulls back the string of a bow, her movements practiced and precise. She's not a soldier, not by trade, perhaps a weaver or a potter. But now, she's a warrior, defending her home with the same fierce determination as any veteran. An arrow flies from her bow, a small act of defiance against the overwhelming might of the Median army. On the wall, a grizzled old soldier, his face a road map of scars, bellows orders, his voice raspy but commanding. He points to a section of the wall where the attackers are concentrating their efforts, urging his men to reinforce the defenses. He's seen countless battles, countless sieges, and he knows, deep in his battle-worn heart, that this one will be different. This is a fight for survival, a fight for the very soul of Nineveh. The sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, a stark contrast to the grim reality on the ground. The drumming continues, relentless, a constant reminder of the enemy at the gates. The arrows fall less frequently now, as if even the attackers need a respite from the carnage. The cries of the wounded echo through the darkening streets, a mournful soundtrack to the dying light. The shadows lengthen, swallowing the city whole. The air grows cold, a chilling premonition of the long, dark night ahead. What will happen when darkness truly falls? Will the Medes launch a full-scale assault under the cover of night? Will the defenders hold their ground? Or will the city walls finally crumble under the relentless pressure? What horrors await within the besieged city as hope dwindles and despair takes hold? The storyteller pauses, his voice trailing off, leaving you hanging on the precipice of the unknown. He looks around at his captivated audience, a mischievous glint in his eye. He knows what he's doing, this master of suspense. He's leaving you in the dark, just like the inhabitants of Nineveh, waiting for the dawn, waiting for... Well, he won't say. Not yet. He's probably learned a thing or two from those scroll-writing soap opera writers. Cliffhangers. They're his specialty. So you'll have to wait. Wait for the next chapter, for the next installment in this epic tale of siege and survival. Wait for the next sunrise over Nineveh. If there is one. The wind carried more than just dust through Nineveh's grand avenues. Whispers, hushed and urgent, snaked through the marketplace, slithered through the taverns, and even brushed against the ears of the palace guards. A traitor, they said. A shadow among them, feeding the enemy their secrets. Fear, thick and cloying, began to mingle with the scent of dates and spices. No one knew who to trust. Every sideways glance, every muttered conversation, felt laden with suspicion. Under the cover of a moonless night, a cloaked figure, their face obscured by shadows, slipped through the eastern gate. They moved with a practiced ease, melting into the darkness like smoke. Beyond the city walls, a small contingent of Median soldiers waited, their horses stamping impatiently. At their head, Cyaxares, his face grim, watched the approaching figure. The identity of this traitor remains a subject of fierce debate among historians. Some ancient texts hint at a disgruntled general. Others point to a wealthy merchant who had lost favor with the king. Still others speak of a priestess, consumed by a prophecy of Nineveh's destruction. The truth, like so much of Nineveh's final days, is lost to the sands of time. The cloaked figure knelt before Cyaxares, offering him not gold, not jewels, but information, the key to Nineveh's seemingly impenetrable defenses. There was, the traitor revealed, a secret entrance, not a forgotten postern gate, not a crumbling section of wall, but something far more ingenious, far more insidious, a passage hidden beneath the Hoser River, leading directly into the heart of the city. Now there's a fringe theory about this secret passage, one that sends shivers down my spine even telling it. Some say it wasn't just water and darkness down there. They say the Assyrians, clever as they were cruel, had lined the passage with trained scorpions. Imagine that. Swimming in the dark, the cold river pressing in on you, and then the agonizing sting. Nightmare fuel, right? Whether true or not, the story adds another layer of darkness to the already grim tale of Nineveh's downfall. The traitor's revelation was a dagger aimed at Nineveh's heart. It bypassed the city's formidable walls, its elite soldiers, its reputation for invincibility. It exposed a vulnerability that no amount of military might could compensate for. The whispered warnings in the marketplace had been true. Betrayal had festered within the city, a poison that weakened it from the inside. Even today, historians continue to argue about the exact circumstances of Nineveh's fall. Was it solely the overwhelming force of the Median and Babylonian armies, their siege engines pounding relentlessly at the city walls? Or did internal divisions fueled by discontent, corruption, and ultimately betrayal play a larger role? Did the seeds of Nineveh's destruction lie not just beyond its walls, but within its very heart? The storyteller leans closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Think about it. The mightiest empire the world had ever seen, brought low not just by swords and fire, but by whispers and shadows. The Assyrians, feared throughout the land, masters of war and conquest, undone by a secret whispered in the dark. It's like those Roman charioteers, you know? They weren't just racing each other, they were trash-talking, spreading rumors, trying to get inside their rivals' heads. Sometimes the best way to win a race isn't to be the fastest, but to make your opponent stumble. And in Nineveh's case, that stumble was a fatal one. The traitor's whispered secret, the hidden passage beneath the river, it all chipped away at the city's foundations. The grand walls, the mighty army, they couldn't protect against a rot that had taken hold from within. He pauses for dramatic effect, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. The betrayal, it seems, was the final blow, the crack that shattered the seemingly invincible facade of the Assyrian Empire. It allowed the enemy to bypass the defenses, to strike at the heart of the city, and to bring about its utter and complete destruction. The story of Nineveh, then, is not just a tale of military might and conquest, but a cautionary tale about the corrosive power of secrets, whispers, and the devastating consequences of betrayal. The air hung thick and heavy, the kind you get just before a storm breaks. Only this wasn't a storm of rain, but a storm of steel. Guided by the weasel, that's what we called him, the traitor, Cyaxares' army was snaking its way through the secret entrance, a forgotten passage known only to a few. Now, it was about to become a gate to hell for the city's defenders. And you wouldn't believe this, some of the Median soldiers, fresh from the steppes, apparently thought they were going to be flying in on magic carpets. Can you imagine? Magic carpets. I swear, some of these lads were still looking for winged horses. Go figure. They emerged into the city like ghosts, silent and deadly. The first few sentries barely had time to gasp before they were cut down, their cries swallowed by the night. Then, all hell broke loose. The heavy gates, the city's pride, swung open with a groan that echoed across the rooftops. A sound that announced not just the arrival of an army, but the end of an era. This, my friends, wasn't just another skirmish. This moment right here changed the course of history. Think about it. Empires rise and fall, dynasties crumble, and it all hinges on moments like these. The defenders, roused from sleep, scrambled to their positions. But the surprise was total. The walls, once thought impenetrable, were now crawling with enemy soldiers. Imagine the chaos. Men shouting orders that no one could hear, the clash of steel against steel, the screams of men, some defiant, others filled with terror. The narrow streets, once bustling with life, now became corridors of death. The smell of blood hung heavy in the air, mingling with the smoke of burning houses. It was a slaughter, a massacre. The city's defenses, once so formidable, crumbled like dried clay. One minute they were masters of their fate. The next, they were fighting for their very lives. The storyteller paused here, taking a slow sip from his cup. He looked around at the faces surrounding him, his eyes glinting in the firelight. He knew he had them hooked. They were leaning in, their breaths held, every muscle tense. Masterclass in storytelling right there. It reminded me of those Babylonian fortune tellers, the ones who would draw out every syllable, every gesture, stringing their clients along, building the anticipation until they were practically begging for the next word. He was doing the same thing, building the tension, letting the horror of that night sink in. You could almost hear the screams echoing in the silence, the cries of the dying, the shouts of the attackers. You could almost smell the smoke, feel the heat of the burning buildings. He painted a picture with his words, a picture of chaos and carnage, a picture that burned itself into your memory. You could see the Medes swarming over the walls, their faces grim, their swords dripping with blood. You could see the defenders, outnumbered and outmatched, fighting with the desperation of men who knew they were doomed. He described the way the defenders, despite being caught completely off guard, rallied around their commanders, trying to stem the tide. He spoke of individual acts of bravery, of men holding their ground against impossible odds, buying precious time for others to escape. He spoke of the women and children, huddled in their homes, praying to gods who seemed to have abandoned them. He didn't shy away from the brutality, from the sheer terror of it all. He wanted them to understand, to truly grasp the horror of what had happened that night. He described the confusion in the streets, the way friend and foe became indistinguishable in the swirling melee. He talked about the fear that gripped the city, the sense of impending doom that hung heavy in the air. He spoke of the desperate prayers whispered in darkened rooms, the cries of mothers clutching their children. He brought the scene to life, making it real, making it visceral. He wasn't just telling a story. He was transporting them back in time, allowing them to experience the horror for themselves. The silence stretched on, broken only by the crackling of the fire. The storyteller remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the flames. He was giving them time, letting the story sink in, letting the weight of it settle upon them. He knew the power of silence, the way it could amplify emotion, deepen the impact of his words. Like those Babylonian fortune-tellers, he understood the art of manipulation, the way to pull at the heartstrings, to evoke the deepest emotions. He painted a vivid picture of the battle, the sounds, the smells, the sheer terror of it all. Now he was letting it hang in the air, letting the silence speak for itself. He was a master of his craft, and he knew exactly how to keep his audience captivated. He was weaving a spell with his words, a spell that held them all in its thrall. They were his puppets, and he was pulling the strings, playing on their emotions, making them feel the fear, the desperation, the horror of that long-ago night. The fall of the city was more than just a story. It was a lesson, a warning, a testament to the fragility of power, the fickleness of fate. And he, the storyteller, was its messenger. The streets run red. Not with wine, not with the celebratory dye they used to splash during festivals. No, this red is thick, viscous, clinging to the cobblestones and staining the white walls of the houses. The acrid smell of smoke stings the nostrils, a choking haze obscuring the once magnificent skyline. Fire leaps from rooftop to rooftop like a demonic dancer, consuming everything in its path. Hopefully the library is spared. All those scrolls, all that knowledge. Fingers crossed. You can see them, the defenders, their faces grim with desperation, their armor battered and broken. They fall back slowly, fighting for every inch of ground, but the enemy tide is relentless. Outnumbered, outmaneuvered, they are forced to retreat, their last stand centered around the looming shadow of the palace. Bravery flickers in their eyes, a desperate defiance in the face of inevitable defeat. They know this is it. This is where they make their final stand. And what a stand it will be! The storyteller's voice rises, echoing through the space, filled with a theatrical intensity. They fought like lions! Imagine it, the clash of bronze on bronze, the cries of men, the thunder of hooves. Each swing of a sword, each thrust of a spear, a testament to their courage. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of flesh and steel against the overwhelming onslaught. They knew they were doomed, yet they fought on, like those Persian acrobats. You know, the ones who used to leap from the palace rooftops during the festivals? Except this wasn't a performance. This was death-defying bravery. This was glory. The storyteller pauses for dramatic effect, allowing the image of the desperate fight to linger. Of course, the scholars, those dusty old scribes, they argue about exactly how it all happened. Did the walls crumble under the relentless battering of siege engines? Did treachery open a gate for the invaders? Did a rogue herd of stampeding elephants, spooked by the chaos, accidentally breach the defenses? Yes, that's a real theory. Elephants, I tell you. But I'm sticking with the overzealous army option myself. Seems more fitting. However it happened, one thing is certain. Nineveh, the mighty, the invincible, fell. And it fell hard. The damage was significant. Let's just leave it at that. The Persian army, a wave of bronze and blood, sweeps through the city's streets. They are everywhere. Their shouts, their curses, the cries of the vanquished. It's a cacophony of horror. Even the sanitized accounts, the ones they tell the children, paint a grim picture. Let's just say it wasn't a pretty sight. Imagine the chaos, the fear, the sheer brutality of it all, and yet, within that horrific tapestry, threads of human resilience still shone. Acts of kindness, of sacrifice, of unwavering loyalty, even in the face of such overwhelming destruction. Deep within the palace, surrounded by the last vestiges of his royal guard, King Sinsharishkun faces his final moments. The sounds of battle draw closer, the enemy's triumphant roars echoing through the once sacred halls. He knows what awaits him. Capture. Humiliation. A slow, agonizing death at the hands of his conquerors. He looks around at his loyal retainers, their faces streaked with soot and blood, their eyes mirroring his own despair. He knows he cannot ask them to die with him. He raises a hand, a gesture of dismissal, of gratitude, of farewell. Then, with a heavy heart, he makes his choice. The flames roar higher, consuming the palace in their fiery embrace. The smoke thickens, obscuring the final act of a king. Sinsharishkun chooses death over capture, a final act of defiance, a tragic end to a once great ruler. And with his death, another layer of tragedy is added to the fall of Nineveh, a city once synonymous with power and glory, reduced to ashes and rubble. A king, once mighty, now consumed by the flames of his own destruction. The end. The storyteller's voice softens, the dramatic intensity fading into a quiet solemnity. The story of Nineveh serves as a warning, a reminder that even the greatest empires can crumble, that even the mightiest walls can be breached, a reminder that power is fleeting, and that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can endure. But at what cost? That, my friends, is a question for the ages. The dust, thick as a funeral shroud, still hung heavy in the air, clinging to the broken teeth of Nineveh's once mighty walls. Soldiers, weary but exhilarated, swarmed over the rubble like ants on a fallen date. The great city, the lion's den, was now a carcass, picked clean by vultures, vultures in bronze helmets and leather armor. It was a sight to behold, a testament to the destructive power of man, and perhaps, some whispered, of the earth itself. There were rumors, you see, whispers among the scholars, that a tremor, a shudder of the earth's very bones, had aided in Nineveh's downfall. Bad timing, wouldn't you say, for the greatest city in the world to pick a fight when the ground beneath its feet was feeling restless. Some said the earth swallowed whole sections of the wall, others that the river choked with debris, hindering escape. Whatever the truth, the whispers only added to the legend, weaving a tapestry of divine intervention into the brutal reality of war. And oh, the spoils! Mountains of them. Gold, enough to blind 1,000 suns. Silver, piled high like winter snowdrifts. Jewels, flashing like captured stars in the conqueror's hands. Cyaxares, the Mede king, his beard braided with gold wire, his eyes gleaming with victory, oversaw the systematic stripping of Nineveh's wealth. Every temple, every palace, every wealthy merchant's home was ransacked. Imagine, if you will, the treasures they unearthed. Ivory carvings intricate as spiderwebs, furniture inlaid with lapis lazuli and mother of pearl, silk so fine they felt like a lover's caress. And that's not even mentioning the library. Ah, the library! A treasure trove of knowledge, a repository of the world's secrets, crammed into thousands of clay tablets, each inscribed with the cuneiform script of the Assyrians. Cyaxares, no fool, knew the value of such a prize. He had scribes cataloging and packing the tablets, adding them to his growing caravan of plunder. He wasn't interested in bedtime stories, mind you. He saw knowledge as a weapon, as potent as any sword. Imagine the secrets he now held in his hands. The histories, the prophecies, the very wisdom of a vanished civilization. And yes, among those tablets, tucked away amidst accounts of kings and conquests, perhaps even a few records of those infamous lizard trades. Fancy jeweled leashes, I hear, for the pampered pets of the Assyrian elite. Can you picture it? A tiny scaled creature, its neck encircled by a collar of sparkling gems, held by some haughty nobleman? Perhaps the lizards were trained to retrieve dropped jewels, or perhaps they were just fashionable. The Assyrians, after all, were nothing if not extravagant. Now, some of those dusty scholars, the ones who spend more time with their noses in scrolls than out in the sunshine, they argue about just how much was taken. Some say Cyaxares carried off the equivalent of a king's ransom 1,000 times over. Others claim much of the wealth was lost in the chaos, looted by opportunistic soldiers, hidden by desperate citizens, or simply swallowed by the earth in that conveniently timed quake. The records you see are inconsistent. Like a tapestry moth-eaten by time, there are holes in the story, and where there are holes, there are theories. And then there's this one theory. A rather juicy one, I must admit. It whispers of a secret tomb, a hidden vault, where the Assyrian priests, seeing the writing on the wall, literally perhaps, given their fondness for inscriptions, stashed away the most precious of Nineveh's treasures. A treasure beyond measure, they say. Gold and jewels, of course, but also artifacts of immense power, objects that held the very essence of Assyrian magic. The location of this tomb? Lost, naturally, swallowed by the sands of time, just like the city itself. A tantalizing bedtime story, isn't it? Enough to send generations of treasure hunters scrambling through the ruins, their hearts pounding with the hope of unearthing the lost hoard. But even without the hidden tomb, the plunder of Nineveh was legendary. It enriched the Median Empire beyond measure, fueling its rise to power and cementing its place in history. And yet, the echoes of Nineveh's fall still resonate. A reminder, perhaps, that even the greatest empires, the most magnificent cities, can crumble into dust. A reminder that victory, however sweet, often comes at a terrible price. And a reminder that sometimes, the most valuable spoils of war are not the gold and jewels, but the stories, the whispers, the legends that linger long after the dust has settled. The air hangs heavy, thick with the dust of fallen empires. This isn't the Nineveh you remember. The vibrant tapestry of the marketplace, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the boisterous laughter spilling from taverns, all gone. Silence reigns now, a heavy, oppressive blanket smothering the city. Where chariots once thundered down wide avenues, now only the wind whispers, a mournful sigh through shattered archways and broken windows. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen I told you about? Well, nobody's laughing about it now. The dust, the same dust that once clung to the skin of kings and conquerors, now settles on everything, a fine, gritty shroud over a city's corpse. It coats the crumbling ziggurats, drifts through the empty doorways of grand palaces, and piles up on the shattered remnants of once imposing statues. Nineveh, the invincible, the untouchable, has been reduced to this, just dust and echoes. You see it, don't you? The way the sunlight, once reflecting off polished bronze and glazed brick, now catches only the dull glint of rubble. The way the shadows stretch long and distorted across the deserted streets, mimicking the distorted memories of a city that once was. It's a different kind of shadow play now, not the flickering light of oil lamps on a bustling street, but the stark contrast of ruin under a merciless sun. The very stones seem to weep, their surfaces worn smooth by time and tragedy. Even the river, once a lifeline of the city, seems to flow slower, burdened by the city's sorrow. This silence, it's not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping city. It's the silence of the tomb, the chilling stillness of a life extinguished. The only sound, apart from the wind's mournful song, is the occasional crunch of your own footsteps as you navigate the debris-strewn streets. Each step raises a small cloud of dust, a ghostly reminder of the bustling life that once filled these spaces. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that this desolate wasteland was once the heart of a mighty empire. The ripple effect of Nineveh's fall is being felt far beyond these crumbling walls. Messengers carry the news to distant lands, their voices hushed with disbelief. Kings and emperors, who once trembled at the mere mention of Nineveh's name, now find themselves looking over their shoulders, questioning their own invincibility. The whispers started subtly, like the rustle of dry leaves in the wind, but now they're growing louder, echoing the same sentiment. If Nineveh can fall, so can we. The world feels unsteady, like the ground itself has shifted beneath their feet. The balance of power, so long held in the iron grip of the Assyrian Empire, is now up for grabs. A dangerous game has begun, and no one knows who will emerge victorious. Look there, amongst the ruins. You see them? The ghosts of Nineveh. Not literal ghosts, of course, but something close. The displaced citizens, wandering aimlessly through the rubble, their faces etched with confusion and despair. They are the living remnants of a shattered empire. Clinging to the fragments of their former lives, they shuffle through the debris, their eyes scanning the ground, searching for something, anything. A lost trinket, a familiar piece of pottery, a memento of a life that no longer exists. They're like ants whose hill has been kicked over, disoriented and lost. They huddle together at night, sharing meager rations and whispered stories of the city that was. They talk of the bustling markets, the grand festivals, the mighty army that once protected them. They speak of these things in hushed tones, as if afraid to speak too loudly and break the fragile spell of memory. Some have started to build makeshift shelters amidst the ruins, pathetic attempts to recreate a semblance of normalcy in a world turned upside down. They try to salvage what they can from the wreckage, patching together broken pieces of furniture, collecting scattered bricks to build makeshift walls. It's a heartbreaking effort, a testament to the human spirit's resilience even in the face of utter devastation. You know, someone told me, and I swear I'm not making this up, that these poor souls, stuck wandering their ruined city, actually invented the concept of the staycation. Little dark humor in the face of tragedy, I suppose. But honestly, who can blame them? Where else are they going to go? This is the aftermath of empire. The dust settles, the silence descends, and the people are left to pick up the pieces. This is the lesson Nineveh teaches, a harsh reminder etched in stone and dust. Nothing lasts forever, not even the mightiest of empires. The storyteller's gaze drifts southward, away from the smoldering ruins of Nineveh, towards a city shimmering on the horizon of history, Babylon. Not a sudden eruption of power, but a slow, steady climb. Think of a vine, patiently wrapping itself around a mighty oak, drawing strength unnoticed, until finally, the oak withers and the vine stands tall. Babylon's ascent had been just like that, years of quiet growth, of consolidating power, of watching and waiting. And now, with Nineveh gone, the vine was ready to bloom. He speaks of Babylon's ambition, a hunger for dominance fueled by Nineveh's demise. The spoils of a fallen empire are a tempting prize, and Babylon was eager to claim them. The land, the wealth, the prestige, all were there for the taking, and Babylon, with its newly acquired taste for power, was ready to feast. He paints a picture of the city, a jewel in the Mesopotamian desert, its palaces gleaming under the sun, their walls adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes of conquest and prosperity. He describes the legendary hanging gardens, a marvel of engineering and artistry, a testament to Babylon's wealth and ingenuity. Terraces rising towards the heavens, overflowing with exotic plants, a verdant oasis in the heart of a dry land. Though, he adds with a conspiratorial wink, some whisper that the beauty was deceptive, that many of those vibrant blooms held a deadly secret, their petals laced with poison. A beautiful, deadly trap, not unlike Babylon itself, perhaps. Yikes. The storyteller pauses, his voice taking on a more thoughtful tone. Did Nineveh's fall truly pave the way for Babylon's rise? Or was this shift in power inevitable, a consequence of deeper, more complex geopolitical forces already in motion? He muses on the question, acknowledging the ongoing debate among historians. Some argue that Nineveh's destruction created a power vacuum, a void that Babylon was perfectly positioned to fill. Others maintain that Babylon's ascent was independent of Nineveh's fate, a result of its own internal strengths and the weakening of other regional powers. Perhaps, he suggests, it was a combination of both, a confluence of circumstances that propelled Babylon to the forefront of the ancient world. A timely demise, a well-played hand, a bit of luck. Who can truly unravel the tangled threads of history? You can almost feel the winds of change sweeping across the ancient world, the old order crumbling, new powers emerging. Empires rise and fall, a constant cycle of growth and decay, a reminder that no dominion, however mighty, lasts forever. The storyteller's voice carries a hint of melancholy, a touch of awe, and, dare we say, a flicker of amusement at the sheer audacity of it all. Think about it, he seems to say, the drama, the intrigue, the shifting alliances, the backstabbing, the sheer human ambition driving these colossal events. Good thing they didn't have social media back then. Can you imagine? Hashtag Ninvehis Overparty. Hashtag Babylonis trending. Hashtag Empires Arisolis Century. The sheer volume of chariot selfies alone would have crashed the ancient internet. He chuckles, a brief, dry sound that echoes through the ages. He continues, describing the meticulous planning and execution of Babylonian expansion, strategic alliances forged, military campaigns launched, territories annexed with ruthless efficiency. He details the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, the king who solidified Babylon's dominance and oversaw the construction of many of its most iconic structures, including the famed Hanging Gardens. He recounts tales of Babylonian scholars and astronomers, their contributions to mathematics and astronomy, their meticulous observations of the celestial bodies, their attempts to decipher the secrets of the universe. Babylon, he emphasizes, was not simply a military power, but a center of learning and culture, a beacon of civilization in a world still shrouded in mystery. He speaks of the Code of Hammurabi, a set of laws inscribed on a towering stele, a testament to Babylon's advanced legal system, a precursor to the complex legal codes that would shape societies for centuries to come. But beneath the veneer of civilization, he hints at a darker side. The forced resettlement of conquered peoples, the enslavement of captured populations, the suppression of dissent. These too were part of the Babylonian story. The splendor of the city, the advancements of its scholars, were built on the backs of the subjugated, a stark reminder that even the most dazzling empires often cast long shadows. The storyteller concludes his account of Babylon's rise with a sense of inevitability. The fall of Nineveh, he reiterates, may have been a catalyst, but Babylon's ascent was a product of its own ambition, its own strengths, its own ruthlessness. It was a testament to the enduring human drive for power, a drive that has shaped the course of history from the earliest civilizations to the present day. And, he adds with a knowing glance, that drive, like the empires it builds, is destined to rise and fall in an endless cycle. He leaves you with the image of Babylon at its zenith, a city of breathtaking beauty and formidable power, a city that, like all empires before it, would eventually meet its own inevitable end. The storyteller's voice lowers again, turning almost to a whisper. He's good at adjusting volume. Probably takes tips from the royal fan-bearers. The dust settled, the screams faded, the vultures, well, they had a feast. Nineveh, the mighty city, was no more. Gone. Reduced to rubble and whispered warnings. But, he pauses, letting the word hang in the air like a hawk circling its prey. Even in its destruction, Nineveh left a mark, a deep, indelible mark on the world. He gestures, a sweeping motion that encompasses not just the courtyard, but the very air they breathe. Imagine, friends, a world without stories, without the knowledge of the stars or the secrets of healing herbs. Imagine a world shrouded in darkness, where even the simplest truths are lost to the winds of time. That, my friends, is the world we almost had. For in Nineveh's heart, nestled amongst the palaces and temples, lay a treasure more precious than any gold or jewel, a library. His voice takes on a reverent tone. Scribes, blessed by the gods of wisdom, toiled tirelessly, their quills scratching across clay tablets. They recorded everything. Histories, prophecies, myths, medical remedies, even the silly little songs children sang in the streets. When Nineveh fell, much was lost, yes, but much was saved. Those tablets, miraculously preserved amidst the destruction, became seeds. Seeds of knowledge scattered on the winds, taking root in distant lands. The stories of Gilgamesh, the wisdom of the ancients, the very foundations of our understanding of the world. All of these were nurtured in the heart of Nineveh and survived its fall. The story shifts back to the present, to the jewel-encrusted throne room in Persepolis. Remember those trained scorpions? The echoes of the storyteller's words seem to linger in the air, a palpable presence in the opulent space. Sunlight streams through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. King Xerxes, contemplative, rises from his throne, seemingly pondering the lessons of the tale. Or maybe he's just wondering where he left his cup of air rag. He paces slowly, his hand stroking his beard, his gaze fixed on the intricate mosaics that adorn the walls. You look around the throne room, noticing how the mosaics illustrate scenes from Nineveh's fall. The detail is breathtaking. You can almost hear the clang of swords, the cries of the defeated, the crackle of flames consuming the great city. The artist has captured the chaos and despair with chilling accuracy, yet there's a strange beauty to it, a testament to the enduring power of art even in the face of destruction. You lean closer to examine a particularly vivid panel depicting the library, scrolls and tablets spilling from shattered shelves. The colors are remarkably vibrant, the blues and greens especially intense. Quirky fact: apparently some mosaic artists believe that grinding up emeralds and mixing them with your paints would keep away evil spirits. Now that's some high-end art preservation right there. You wonder if the shimmering quality of the green tiles is due to this peculiar practice. It certainly lends an otherworldly quality to the scene, as if the knowledge contained within those lost scrolls is still radiating some kind of mystical energy. Another mosaic shows the Assyrian king, his face a mask of anguish, watching his city burn. The artist has captured the weight of his despair, the realization of utter defeat. It's a powerful image, a stark reminder of the ephemeral nature of power. Even the mightiest empires can crumble into dust. Xerxes stops before a mosaic depicting the fleeing citizens of Nineveh, their faces etched with fear and desperation. He stares at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Is he reflecting on the fragility of his own empire? Is he drawing parallels between Nineveh's fate and the potential future of Persepolis? Or perhaps he's simply captivated by the artistry, the sheer skill required to create such a vivid depiction of human suffering. He turns abruptly, his eyes sweeping across the assembled courtiers. "The storyteller speaks truth," he declares, his voice resonant with a newfound gravity. Even in its destruction, Nineveh teaches us. It reminds us that knowledge is power, that stories are the lifeblood of a civilization. It reminds us that even the greatest empires can fall, and that we must strive to leave a legacy worthy of remembrance. He pauses, his gaze settling on you. What lessons do you draw from this tale? The question hangs in the air, a challenge thrown down in the opulent silence of the throne room. The trained scorpions, sensing the shift in mood, remain motionless in their jeweled cages, their venomous tails twitching ever so slightly. The air is thick with anticipation, the fate of empires, perhaps even the future of the world, hanging in the balance. The air in the throne room crackled with a tension thicker than the coal rimming the eyes of the courtiers. The usual drone of sycophantic pronouncements felt strained, each word laced with a forced joviality that did little to mask the underlying anxiety. I caught the eye of Lord Farnaspes, his usually jovial face a mask of concern. He gave me a quick, almost imperceptible nod, his hand subtly gesturing towards the far corner of the room where a knot of officials murmured amongst themselves. Their whispers, though hushed, seemed to vibrate through the very stones of the palace, a disquieting hum beneath the surface of the opulent facade. I remembered my mother's maid, old Persia, grinding crocodile dung into a paste, claiming it protected against the sun. She'd also whispered stories of courtly intrigue, tales I'd dismissed as the ramblings of an old woman. Now, surrounded by these furtive glances and hushed conversations, I wondered if Persia's whispers had held more truth than I'd realized. The king, oblivious or perhaps feigning obliviousness, continued to hold court. His voice, usually booming with pronouncements of conquest and glory, sounded oddly flat, as if even he sensed the unease permeating the room. He spoke of the recent military campaigns, of the vastness of his empire, but his words lacked their usual fire. It was like watching a lion in a gilded cage, still magnificent, but stripped of its wild power. My mind drifted back to the story of Nineveh, the grand city swallowed by the desert sands. Nana had often recounted the tale, her voice low and ominous, warning me of the dangers of hubris and the fleeting nature of power. Back then, it was just a bedtime story, a cautionary fable. Now, amidst the palpable tension in the throne room, the story took on a new, chilling significance. Was it merely a tale, or was it a carefully crafted message, a subtle warning whispered down through generations? A warning, perhaps, not only of the fall of empires, but of the precariousness of the throne itself. Scholars, even then, debated who the true recipient of the message was. Was it meant for Xerxes, a reminder of the fragility of his power? Or was it aimed at someone else entirely? A coded message to a faction within the court, a seed of dissent sown in fertile ground. The thought made me shiver. The air, heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something acrid and metallic that I couldn't quite place, seemed to close in around me. I scanned the room, my gaze flitting from face to face, searching for any sign, any clue that might illuminate the undercurrents of intrigue swirling around me. And then I saw it. A courtier, Lord Mardonius, known for his impeccable manners and unwavering loyalty to the king, was standing near the foot of the throne. He seemed to be adjusting his robes, a seemingly innocuous gesture, but as I watched, I saw his hand, concealed within the folds of his sleeve, discreetly slip a rolled piece of parchment into the waiting hand of a shadowy figure, lurking in the shadows near the dais. The exchange was so swift, so subtle, that I almost doubted my own eyes, but the fleeting glimpse of the scroll, the furtive movements of the two men, the way the shadowy figure melted back into the darkness, told me everything I needed to know. Something was afoot. The fringe historians, those obsessed with whispers and shadows, later speculated that the scroll was written in invisible ink, a concoction of lemon juice and crushed beetles, only revealed when held over a flame. A romantic notion, perhaps, but one that fueled the spy stories that circulated in hushed tones for decades after. Whether true or not, the image of that hidden message, its contents unknown, its purpose shrouded in mystery, became a potent symbol of the intrigue that permeated the court. The king, still oblivious, droned on about the glories of Persia. But the whispers, the covert glances, the furtive exchange of the scroll, had woven a web of unease that clung to the throne room like a shroud. The grand facade of power and stability was beginning to crumble, revealing the cracks beneath, and I, caught in the currents of this hidden war, could only watch and wait, knowing that the story of Nineveh was more than just a bedtime tale. It was a prophecy, a warning, and, perhaps, the prelude to a storm. The heavy cedar doors of the throne room swung closed behind me, the scent of incense and something faintly metallic clinging to my robes. The echoing silence of the corridor was a stark contrast to the boisterous court within. But the silence didn't last. From the alcove near the king's guard's post, hushed voices slithered out, barely audible above the crackling of the braziers. Obsessed with his stories, blind to the real danger, Greece amasses its strength while he fills his head with legends. I pressed myself against the cool stone wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. Conspiracy. It hung in the air, thick and suffocating, like the incense from the throne room. They were talking about Xerxes, about his fascination with the stories of past empires, his seemingly casual dismissal of the growing threat from across the Aegean. They believed he was too caught up in narratives of glory to see the gathering storm. They probably had ancient doom-scrollers even back then, constantly refreshing their papyrus feeds with the latest bad news from the Western satrapies. I strained to hear more, piecing together fragments of whispered anxieties and resentments. It was clear that these weren't just idle courtiers gossiping. This was a plot, still in its nascent stages, but with the potential to shake the very foundations of the empire. It's fascinating, really, how history repeats itself. Scholars still debate the exact details of this conspiracy, how deep it ran, who was truly involved. Some whispers suggested a handful of disgruntled nobles. Others hinted at a wider network of officials and priests. There's even a fringe theory about a secret society dedicated to resurrecting Nineveh. Sounds like a bedtime story in itself, doesn't it? A secret society meeting in darkened cellars, plotting the return of a long-dead empire. It's almost comical, yet somehow unsettling. But the comical elements faded quickly when I considered the implications. The whispers echoing in this Persepolitan corridor mirrored the anxieties that had festered in the final days of Nineveh. The same hubris, the same blindness to external threats, the same internal power struggles tearing at the fabric of the empire. I'd seen the cuneiform tablets detailing the final days of Nineveh, the frantic pleas for reinforcements, the accusations of treachery, the lamentations for a lost golden age. And here, in Persepolis, I was witnessing the same dynamics playing out, the same seeds of destruction being sown. Xerxes, like the last Assyrian kings, seemed more preoccupied with the narratives of the past than the realities of the present. He sought to emulate the great kings of old, but he failed to see the lessons their failures offered. A sudden movement near the end of the corridor caught my eye, the shadowy figure I'd seen lurking in the throne room. He moved with a strange fluidity, almost gliding along the wall. For a moment, he paused, his head cocked, as if listening for something. Then, with surprising agility, he slipped behind a large tapestry depicting a lion hunt. I held my breath, waiting to see if anyone else had noticed. The guards at the end of the corridor remained impassive, their gazes fixed straight ahead. It was as if the figure had simply vanished into thin air. Driven by a sudden surge of curiosity, or perhaps recklessness, I cautiously approached the tapestry. I ran my hand across the richly woven fabric, feeling for any sign of an opening. My fingers brushed against a hidden latch, cleverly concealed within the lion's mane. With a faint click, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, dimly lit passage. The air that wafted from within was cool and damp, carrying the distinct aroma of fermented mare's milk. The royal airag cellar. Of all the secret passages in the palace, this one led to the king's personal stash of fermented mare's milk. It was an odd choice, to say the least. What was the shadowy figure doing sneaking into the airag cellar? Was he simply a thirsty servant, taking advantage of a quiet moment to indulge in a forbidden sip? Or was there something more to it? The whispered conspiracy, the shadowy figure, the secret passage. It all seemed to coalesce into a single, unsettling premonition. Something was amiss in Persepolis. The grandeur, the opulence, the carefully constructed narratives of imperial power. It all felt like a thin veneer over a simmering cauldron of intrigue and discontent. And I, caught in the currents of this unfolding drama, felt a growing sense of unease. The stories Xerxes so cherished were beginning to take on a darker, more ominous tone. The past wasn't just a source of inspiration. It was a warning. And it seemed that no one, not even the king himself, was listening. I hesitated at the entrance to the passage, torn between the urge to follow the shadowy figure and the prudence of returning to my own chambers. The risks were significant. If I was discovered snooping around the king's private airag stash, the consequences could be severe. But the whispers of conspiracy, the glimpse of the shadowy figure, the strange choice of hiding place, it all pointed to something deeper, something more significant than a stolen drink. And I knew with a chilling certainty that I couldn't simply ignore it. The flickering lamplight cast long shadows across the parchment, illuminating Aurelia's concentrated frown. Her fingers, smudged with ink, delicately traced the cuneiform script. Two small lizards, emerald and jade, perched on a nearby shelf, their obsidian eyes blinking slowly, mirroring her cautious nature. Aurelia, a scribe from a minor family, was known throughout the palace not for her lineage but for the sharpness of her mind, her ability to glean insights others missed. She admired Xerxes, the young king, his genuine thirst for knowledge, his attempts to govern with wisdom. But she also saw, with a clarity that sometimes felt like a curse, his naivete, his blindness to the whispers and shadows that slithered through the court's marble halls. He saw advisors, she saw vipers, he saw debates. She saw carefully orchestrated power plays, the weight of which she knew pressed down on her, a physical ache in her chest. The conspiracy was intricate, a web of deceit woven so tightly it threatened to strangle the kingdom's very heart. High-ranking officials, men whose names were synonymous with power and loyalty, were plotting to usurp Xerxes, to replace his rule with their own twisted vision. And Aurelia, a lowly scribe, held the key to their undoing. A single misplaced document, a carelessly overheard conversation, a few strategically placed words. It was all in her hands. The dilemma gnawed at her. Silence meant complicity. Silence meant watching as Xerxes, with all his idealism and good intentions, was stripped of his throne, his dreams crumbling around him. Yet, speaking out, that was a gamble with potentially fatal consequences. Defying the established order, challenging the entrenched power structure, was akin to sneezing while facing north. Except instead of a vague omen of bad luck, the consequences could be far more tangible. Execution, perhaps, or a quiet disappearance into the dungeons, where screams echoed unanswered. They used to think that sneezing while facing north was an omen of bad luck. Talk about pressure to control your allergies. This, however, wasn't a sneeze. It was a roar waiting to be unleashed, and she wasn't sure she was brave enough to let it out. She dipped her quill in ink, her hand trembling. Should she write? Should she warn Xerxes? Could a single scribe, a woman with no title, no influence beyond the rustle of parchment and the scratch of her quill, truly make a difference in a court as rigid and hierarchical as this? History, as she knew from her endless hours poring over ancient scrolls, offered little comfort. It was a tapestry woven primarily with the threads of kings and conquerors, their triumphs and failures shaping the narrative. The stories of those who stood in the shadows, those whose whispers could have toppled empires but were lost to the winds of time, were rarely told. Emerald, sensing her distress, scurried down the shelf and nestled onto her shoulder, its cool scales a soothing presence against her skin. Jade followed, its small head butting against her hand in a gesture of reptilian comfort. They were her silent confidants, witnesses to her internal turmoil. They, at least, wouldn't judge her for her fear, her indecision. Historians, even millennia later, would debate the role of individuals like Aurelia, those caught in the gears of history, possessing knowledge that could reshape the course of empires but lacking the power to wield it openly. Were they truly powerless, their struggles insignificant? Or did their silent acts of defiance, their careful maneuvering in the shadows, plant the seeds for larger changes, ripples that eventually became tidal waves? Some scholars, indulging in flights of fancy, even theorized that Aurelia was a secret descendant of the librarians of Nineveh, inheriting not only their love of knowledge, but also a legacy of quietly safeguarding truth against the forces of destruction. A romantic notion, perhaps, but one that hinted at the enduring fascination with the potential power of seemingly insignificant individuals. Was Aurelia secretly a descendant of the Nineveh librarians? It was a tantalizing thought. Aurelia sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of her responsibility. The lizards, sensing her shift in mood, nestled closer. The lamplight flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock her indecision. The conspiracy was a serpent, coiling tighter and tighter around the kingdom. She couldn't remain silent forever. She had to choose. But which choice carried the least destruction? Which path held the faintest glimmer of hope? The answer, like the whispers in the court, remained elusive, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. The parchment remained blank, a testament to her crippling dilemma. The fate of a kingdom, perhaps, rested on the delicate balance of her decision. The scent of dried herbs and old parchment hung heavy in the air, a comforting aroma that Aurelia usually found solace in. Today, however, the familiar scent did little to calm the storm brewing within her. Nicia, her silver hair braided and adorned with beads of polished bone, sat across from her, a steaming cup of herbal tea cradled in her hands. Nicia, a scholar and storyteller revered for her wisdom, was the only one Aurelia felt she could turn to. "The whispers are growing louder, Nicia," Aurelia confessed, her voice barely above a breath. "They slither through the marketplace, through the homes, even within the palace walls. They speak of dissent, of rebellion." Nicia took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes, wise and ancient, holding Aurelia's gaze. "And what do these whispers say, child?" "They speak of the emperor's injustices," Aurelia replied, her hands clenching into fists. "Of the silenced voices, the missing scholars, the growing unrest. They say things I dare not repeat aloud." A knowing smile touched Nicia's lips. "Silence, Aurelia, is a powerful weapon. But it is a weapon most often wielded by those who lurk in the shadows. It allows their whispers to fester, to grow into something far more dangerous than open dissent. The true strength of any society, child, lies not in the might of its armies, but in its willingness to embrace truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be." Aurelia shifted uncomfortably. Open dissent was risky. The emperor's spies were everywhere, their ears ever alert for any hint of treason. Speaking out, even whispering, could mean imprisonment, or worse. I want to do something," Aurelia stammered, her voice laced with fear. "But what can I do? I am but one voice against a tide of silence." Nicia placed her cup on the table, the gentle clink echoing in the quiet room. "You are a storyteller, Aurelia. You weave tales that capture the heart and ignite the imagination. You have the power to give voice to the voiceless, to bring truth to light." Aurelia looked down at her hands, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a spark ignite within her, a flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness. Yet fear still gnawed at her. The emperor's wrath was swift and merciless. "But what if I fail?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What if my words are not enough?" Nicia reached across the table and gently placed her hand over Aurelia's. "Stories are powerful tools, Aurelia. They can inspire, they can educate, they can incite change, but they are merely tools. Words without action remain faint whispers in the wind." Aurelia remembered the scorpion and the frog, a story Nicia had told her long ago, a tale of trust betrayed. The scorpion, promising not to sting, convinces the frog to carry him across the river. Midway, he stings the frog, dooming them both. When the frog asks why, the scorpion replies, "It is in my nature." The story, at the time, had seemed a simple fable. Now, it resonated with a chilling clarity. The emperor, like the scorpion, would act according to his nature, regardless of the consequences. "The emperor, he will not listen," Aurelia said, her voice barely a whisper. "Perhaps not," Nicia agreed, her eyes twinkling. "But others will. The people thirst for truth, Aurelia. They yearn for a voice to speak their unspoken fears. You can be that voice." Aurelia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Nicia's words resonated within her, fueling the spark of defiance that had begun to flicker within her soul. She knew the risks. She knew the potential consequences. Yet, the thought of remaining silent, of allowing the emperor's lies to continue to spread unchecked, was a burden she could no longer bear. "I will speak," she declared, her voice firm, the fear replaced by a newfound determination. "I will tell the stories. I will give voice to the silenced." "Good," Nicia said, a proud smile spreading across her face. "But remember, Aurelia, stories are seeds. They need fertile ground to take root and grow. Words alone are not enough. You must find a way to turn those words into action." Aurelia nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. She would need allies, people who shared her convictions and were willing to risk everything to fight for the truth. She would need to be clever, to navigate the treacherous currents of the court with caution and cunning. She would need to be brave, to face the emperor's wrath head-on. The task ahead was daunting, but Aurelia no longer felt alone. She had the wisdom of Nicia, the support of those who whispered in the shadows, and the burning fire of truth within her heart. The spark had ignited, and now it was time to fan the flames. The time for silence was over. The time for action had begun. The flickering lamplight cast long shadows across Aurelia's chamber as she paced, the parchment clutched in her hand crinkling with each restless turn. Her plan, a delicate tapestry woven with threads of diplomacy and daring, rested entirely on the shoulders of one man, Marcus. He was a legend etched in the annals of the Empire, a military commander whose tactical brilliance was matched only by his unwavering moral compass. Navigating the treacherous currents of court politics, a labyrinthine world of whispers and veiled threats, required a deft hand and a cool head. And Marcus, at least in Aurelia's estimation, possessed both. She knew that success hinged on appealing to his unwavering loyalty to the Empire, a loyalty forged in the heat of battle and tempered by years of unwavering service. But Marcus was also known for his aversion to courtly intrigue, preferring the straightforward clarity of the battlefield to the shadowed corridors of power. Convincing him to involve himself in this treacherous game would require the utmost care. Aurelia stopped pacing and smoothed out the parchment on her writing table. She dipped her quill into the inkwell and began to write, each word a carefully placed stone in the mosaic of her argument. She couldn't afford a single misstep. The conspiracy she had uncovered, a web of deceit that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the Empire, had to be exposed. But doing so prematurely, without the right allies, would be like lighting a torch in a powder keg. She knew Marcus might be wary of her, a woman venturing into the traditionally male domain of military and political strategy. She also knew the whispers that followed her, whispers of her ambition, her intelligence, her unconventional methods. She smiled wryly. Let them whisper. Let them underestimate her. It would only work to her advantage. She thought of Marcus, his stern visage, his reputation for discipline. Then, a fleeting, almost ludicrous thought crossed her mind. She'd overheard a scholar speculating just the other day about the origins of the man bun, apparently a surprisingly popular hairstyle among Persian noblemen. Was it possible, she wondered with a flicker of amusement, that the Empire's most decorated soldier secretly harbored a fondness for Babylonian romance novels? The image of the stoic Marcus, engrossed in a tale of star-crossed lovers, was so incongruous it almost made her laugh aloud. It was a reminder, though, that even the most formidable figures were still human, with their own hidden quirks and vulnerabilities. Perhaps, she mused, a touch of humanity was precisely what she needed to reach him. Aurelia continued writing, weaving a narrative that emphasized the gravity of the threat to the Empire, the potential for chaos and destruction. She highlighted the Emperor's vulnerability, his trust misplaced in those who plotted against him. She appealed to Marcus's sense of duty, his commitment to the stability and prosperity of the realm. She avoided any mention of her own personal stake in the matter, focusing instead on the greater good. The historians, those meticulous chroniclers of the past, still debated the extent of Marcus's power and influence at this pivotal moment in the Empire's history. Some argued that he held more sway than even the Emperor himself, his command of the legions giving him unparalleled authority. Others maintained that his power was more circumscribed, limited by the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined the imperial court. Whether Aurelia's decision to approach Marcus was a stroke of genius, a calculated gamble, or simply the least dangerous option available to her remained a subject of ongoing scholarly debate. Had she considered other avenues? Had she weighed the risks and rewards of each potential course of action? The historical record, frustratingly incomplete, offered no definitive answers. The first rays of dawn filtered through the window as Aurelia finished her letter. She read it over carefully, scrutinizing each phrase, each carefully chosen word. It was a masterpiece of persuasion, a delicate balance of urgency and respect. She sealed the letter with her personal signet ring, a small but significant symbol of her authority. Now, all that remained was to deliver the letter and await Marcus's response. The fate of the Empire, perhaps even her own fate, hung in the balance. She knew the risks. She knew the dangers. But she also knew that inaction was not an option. The conspiracy had to be exposed, and she was willing to risk everything to make it happen. The weight of her decision settled heavily upon her. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. This was just the beginning. The first move in a game of intricate strategy, a game where the stakes were impossibly high. And Aurelia, with her carefully crafted plan, was ready to play. The air hung heavy with the scent of jasmine. White blossoms draped over trellises, creating a secluded alcove in the heart of the garden. A small fountain trickled nearby, its gentle music a counterpoint to the hushed tension of the meeting. Aurelia, her hands clasped tightly before her, stood opposite Marcus. He sat on a marble bench, his posture relaxed yet radiating an aura of authority. Tulia stood beside Aurelia, her presence a silent pillar of support. "Thank you for granting us this audience, Emperor," Aurelia began, her voice carefully modulated. She had rehearsed these words countless times, smoothing away any hint of the passionate conviction that burned within her. She knew that here, in this rarefied air of power, measured words held more sway than fiery pronouncements. "We come to you with a matter of grave importance to the future of the Empire." Marcus's gaze, steady and penetrating, rested on her face. He made a small gesture with his hand, inviting her to continue. "The unrest in the eastern provinces," Aurelia said, choosing her words carefully, "requires a delicate touch. The people are burdened by excessive taxation, and their loyalty is strained." She resisted the urge to mention the positive influence of her pet lizard, Scipio, on recent negotiations with a smaller faction. While Scipio's presence often seemed to soothe tense situations, the belief in such things was considered superstition, and Marcus was a man of logic, not whimsy. "We believe that a reduction in taxes, combined with increased investment in infrastructure, would greatly improve the situation." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "A reduction in taxes? And where, pray tell, would these funds for infrastructure come from?" Aurelia pressed on, undeterred. "From a more equitable distribution of resources. The western provinces currently enjoy a disproportionate share of the empire's wealth. By reallocating some of these resources, we can strengthen the east and ensure the stability of the entire empire." A flicker of something that might have been amusement crossed Marcus's face. Stability, a worthy goal, but one that often requires difficult choices. He paused, his gaze shifting to the gently flowing fountain. "The western provinces are powerful. They contribute significantly to the imperial coffers. Their support is essential." Tulia stepped forward, her voice resonant with conviction. "Emperor, we understand the complexities of this situation, but we also know the strength of our shared heritage. Our ancestors fought and bled to build this empire. We must not allow short-sighted policies to fracture the very foundations they laid." She invoked the spirit of their shared lineage, the unspoken bond of blood and loyalty. It was a gamble, appealing to the emotional rather than the intellectual. But Tulia knew that such appeals sometimes held unexpected power. Marcus remained impassive, his face betraying little of his thoughts. Loyalty is a precious commodity indeed, but so too is stability. And stability, as I have said, requires difficult choices. Aurelia saw the gears turning in his mind, the slow, deliberate calculation of risks and rewards. He was not a man easily swayed by sentiment. She knew she needed to offer him more than just pleas to loyalty and tradition. "Emperor," she said, "we have conducted extensive research into the economic conditions of the eastern provinces. We have compiled detailed reports outlining the potential benefits of our proposed reforms." She gestured to a scroll case held by one of her attendants. "These reports demonstrate that the long-term gains from increased investment in the East far outweigh any short-term losses incurred by a temporary reduction in tax revenue from the West. A stronger East, a more unified empire, that is the true stability we seek." Marcus considered her words, his gaze now thoughtful. He seemed intrigued by the mention of data and analysis, the language of logic and reason. He gestured for the reports. As an attendant approached and unfurled the scrolls, Aurelia held her breath. The silence in the jasmine-scented garden deepened as Marcus perused the documents. The only sound was the gentle whisper of the fountain and the rustling of the scrolls as he turned them. Aurelia watched his face, searching for any sign of his thoughts, but his expression remained inscrutable. He finally looked up, his gaze meeting Aurelia's. "Your arguments are intriguing, but I require time to consider them fully. This is a matter of great consequence, and I will not make a hasty decision." Aurelia nodded, trying to conceal her disappointment. She knew this was not a rejection, but neither was it an acceptance. It was a postponement, a moment held in suspended animation, waiting for the scales to tip one way or the other. "We understand, Emperor," Tulia said, her voice calm and steady. We trust in your wisdom and judgment." Marcus rose from the bench. "You may leave the reports. I will study them carefully." He paused, his gaze sweeping across both women. "The future of the Empire rests on such decisions. We must all strive to make choices that serve the greater good, even if those choices are difficult." As Aurelia and Tulia bowed and withdrew from the fragrant embrace of the jasmine garden, the uncertainty of the future hung heavy in the air. The meeting had been a delicate dance of diplomacy, a careful maneuvering of arguments and appeals. The outcome remained uncertain, a gamble whose results remained to be seen. The gears of politics had begun to turn, slowly, inexorably, and only time would tell which direction they would ultimately take. The weight of the empire settled on Marcus's shoulders like a physical burden. He paced the length of his study, the mosaics underfoot cold against his sandaled feet. Aurelius's plea echoed in his mind, the desperate hope in his friend's voice, a stark contrast to the reasoned arguments he'd presented. Logically, Marcus knew Aurelius was right. Overt rebellion would be a bloodbath, a swift and brutal end to any hope of restoring balance to the court. But the personal conviction, the deep-seated loyalty he felt towards the emperor, that was what truly tipped the scales. He stopped by the window, gazing out at the sprawling city, a silent testament to the power he was now complicit in challenging. He was playing a dangerous game, one where the stakes were impossibly high. He could lose everything, including his life. But he couldn't stand by and watch Aurelius be manipulated, watch the empire crumble under the weight of Xerxes' ambition. He could already see the ripples spreading. A whispered conversation with a trusted scribe, a discreet reassignment of guards, a subtly worded request for information. Each action, seemingly insignificant on its own, was a thread in the intricate tapestry of their plan. He knew he was walking a tightrope, every move carefully calculated to avoid detection. The slightest misstep could send him plummeting into the abyss. He felt the pressure, the constant awareness that he was operating under the watchful eyes of Xerxes and his network of informants. Even the air seemed thick with suspicion. He thought of the servants, the guards, the officials, all potential witnesses, all potential victims should their plot be discovered. Their lives were in his hands now, as much as Aurelius's was. He sat down at his desk, the smooth, cool surface, a welcome anchor in the swirling chaos of his thoughts. Historians, he mused, would dissect his motivations, pick apart his actions, searching for the underlying truth. Was it purely personal loyalty to Aurelius? A desire to restore political balance? Or perhaps a blend of both, intertwined so tightly that even he couldn't unravel the threads? He smiled wryly. They would debate, argue, and write volumes, never truly knowing the weight of the decision he was making in this quiet room, under the flickering lamplight. He wondered if they would understand the fear that gnawed at him, the constant awareness of the precariousness of his position, or would they simply see a man driven by ambition, by a thirst for power? He pushed the thought aside. History would have its say. For now he had a task to complete. He dipped his quill into the ink, the familiar scratching sound a stark counterpoint to the tumultuous thoughts swirling in his head. The letter to Xerxes was a delicate dance of diplomacy, a carefully constructed facade designed to conceal its true purpose. He chose his words with the precision of a surgeon, each phrase, each sentence crafted to avoid raising suspicion. He expressed concern, of course, but veiled it in respectful deference to Xerxes' authority. He offered suggestions, framed as humble observations, designed to subtly undermine Xerxes' influence without triggering a backlash. He even managed to weave in a seemingly innocuous inquiry about the recent sighting of a white raven in the palace gardens. Aurelius had once joked, in darker times, that seeing a white raven was an omen that your advisors were plotting against you. Marcus allowed himself a small, grim smile at the irony. Tough job indeed. He reread the letter, scrutinizing every line, every word. It had to be perfect. Too much at stake to risk a misstep. He sanded the parchment, smoothing away the rough edges, mirroring the careful smoothing of his own anxieties, the masking of his true intentions. He sealed the letter with his personal signet ring, the image of a stoic philosopher, a silent testament to the mask he now wore. He called for a messenger, a young man with eager eyes and a quick step. He handed him the letter, his voice calm and measured. "Deliver this to Lord Xerxes immediately," he instructed, his gaze unwavering. and ensure it reaches his hands personally. The messenger bowed and hurried away, leaving Marcus alone in the quiet stillness of his study. He watched the young man disappear into the bustling corridors of the palace, carrying with him the weight of Marcus's decision, the fate of the empire resting on the delicate balance of words on parchment. He stood for a long time, staring out into the gathering darkness, the flickering lights of the city mirroring the uncertainty that flickered within him. He had cast the die. Now he could only wait and pray that the gamble had paid off. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, more difficult decisions to make. This was just the beginning. But for tonight, he allowed himself a small sliver of hope, a fragile ember in the encroaching darkness. Torches flared, casting flickering shadows across the intricate mosaics that adorned the throne room. Xerxes, his expression unreadable, paced before the assembled counselors. His bejeweled hand gripped a scroll, its edges frayed from his restless handling. The air hung heavy with the scent of incense and unspoken anxieties. "Bring forth the brazier," Xerxes commanded, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. A servant hurried forward with a bronze vessel filled with glowing coals. Xerxes unfurled the scroll and held it over the heat, the parchment crackling softly. "A message has arrived from the west," he announced, his gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. "From the Roman, Marcus." A murmur rippled through the room. Some counselors leaned forward, their expressions eager. Others shifted uneasily, avoiding the emperor's gaze. Xerxes began to read, his voice measured and controlled. He recounted Marcus's words, the accusations of conspiracy, the veiled threats, the demands for an explanation. "A brazen challenge," boomed a voice from the emperor's right. General Hydarnes, his chest adorned with medals of past conquests, stepped forward. "This Marcus seeks to undermine our authority. We should respond with force, remind him of the might of Persia." "Perhaps," countered Mazdak, the wizened royal treasurer, his fingers nervously toying with the rings on his hand. "But the Roman legions are formidable. Open conflict would be costly. Might we not offer concessions, appease this troublesome senator?" Another counselor, a young, ambitious nobleman named Darius, sneered. "Appeasement is the language of weakness. This Marcus speaks of a conspiracy. Perhaps it is a fabrication, a ploy to distract us from his own ambitions in the West." The debate continued, voices rising and falling, each counselor offering their interpretation of Marcus's letter. Some saw it as a genuine threat, a harbinger of war. Others viewed it as a desperate bluff, an attempt to exploit perceived weakness within the empire. Still others, their eyes glittering with avarice, whispered of using this supposed conspiracy to eliminate rivals and consolidate their own power. Xerxes listened, his expression unchanging, his fingers drumming against the armrest of his throne. He recalled the storyteller's tales of cunning foxes and naive lions, of whispers that could topple empires. He beckoned with a subtle gesture. From the shadows near the entrance, the storyteller emerged, his movements as silent as the desert wind. The old man bowed low before the emperor, his face impassive. "Your Majesty," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. He paused, drawing the silence out, a master of dramatic tension. "This conspiracy, it is a viper, coiled in the heart of the empire. Its venom spreads, poisoning the minds of your subjects. It whispers of discontent, of rebellion. It feeds on fear and uncertainty." He paused again, allowing his words to sink in. "Left unchecked," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "this viper will strike, and the empire will crumble." The storyteller's words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. The dynamic in the room shifted subtly. Fear began to seep into the bravado of the warhawks. General Hydarnes, his earlier bluster fading, now muttered about the need for internal security. Mazdak, the treasurer, wrung his hands, his eyes darting nervously towards the emperor. Darius, however, saw opportunity in the rising tide of anxiety. He stepped forward, his voice ringing with conviction. "The storyteller speaks wisely, Your Majesty. This conspiracy must be rooted out. We must identify the traitors within our midst, those who would betray your trust and undermine the stability of the empire." He glanced meaningfully at several of his rivals amongst the counselors, his eyes glinting with malice. "Perhaps," he added, his voice dripping with insinuation, "certain individuals, driven by their own ambitions, have been unduly influenced by Roman whispers. Several counselors paled, understanding the implicit accusation. The whispers of conspiracy, once directed at an external threat, were now turning inward, becoming a weapon in the ongoing power struggles within the Persian court. Xerxes observed the unfolding drama, his eyes narrowed. He understood the storyteller's message, the danger it represented, but he also recognized the ambition in Darius's voice, the eagerness to exploit the situation for personal gain. He remained silent, letting the tension simmer, allowing the counselors to reveal their true intentions. He needed to know who he could trust, who would serve the empire, and who would seek to profit from its potential downfall. The Romans' letter had ignited a fire, and Xerxes, like a skilled craftsman, was carefully shaping the flames, forging a response that would serve his own intricate designs. He knew one thing for certain: the Romans' missive was not merely a challenge, but a catalyst, an event that threatened to reshape the very fabric of his empire. And Xerxes, the emperor of emperors, would not stand idly by while his legacy was threatened. The first hint of light, a pale lavender smear across the horizon, barely kissed the tops of the date palms when the rumbling began. It started as a low growl, a tremor in the earth, then grew into a sustained roar that echoed off the palace walls. I pressed my ear against the cool stone, trying to decipher the sound. Chariots. Dozens of them. Someone was making a very public statement this morning. A nervous giggle escaped Parmes, my handmaid. Sounds like the entire royal stable is on the move. Do you suppose they're finally going after those desert bandits? I shook my head, a knot tightening in my stomach. I doubt it. This feels different. The noise intensified, interspersed now with the shouts of men and the sharp cracks of whips. It sounded like they'd invented the morning commute a few thousand years early. A wry smile touched my lips. Even in a crisis, some things never changed. Soon the courtyard below filled with a chaotic ballet of chariots, horses, and heavily armed soldiers. Dust rose in choking clouds, obscuring the scene in a swirling haze. The air crackled with an almost palpable tension. This wasn't a routine patrol. This was a targeted operation. Word filtered back quickly. The king's guard, on Xerxes' direct orders, was rounding up the alleged conspirators. Every nobleman, every priest, every scribe whose name had been whispered in the shadows of the palace was being dragged from their beds and hauled away in chains. The efficiency was brutal, the message unmistakable. Relief washed over me, a cold wave against the fear that had been my constant companion for weeks. Darius, thankfully, hadn't been implicated. His name, it seemed, hadn't reached the king's ears. He was safe, for now. But the relief was tinged with a bitter aftertaste. Scapegoats. Even in Xerxes' supposed quest for truth, there had to be sacrifices. Political expediency, they called it. A necessary evil to maintain stability. But to me, it felt like a different kind of injustice. Men dragged from their homes, their families, their lives shattered based on whispers and rumors. Were they truly guilty? Or were they simply pawns in a larger game, their lives deemed expendable to appease a nervous king? Xerxes, I'd learned, was a peculiar man. He cared less for the machinations of power, and more for the pursuit of knowledge, for stories and philosophies. He'd been swayed, not by political strategizing, but by the narratives spun around him. Tales of secret plots and imminent uprisings, whispered into his ear by advisors eager to solidify their own positions. He was a seeker of wisdom, yes, but susceptible to the manipulations of those who claimed to possess it. Now, as the sun finally broke free of the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the courtyard, I watched the last of the prisoners being led away. Their faces were etched with fear, confusion, and in some cases, a defiant anger. I wondered how many of them were truly involved in this supposed conspiracy, and how many were simply victims of circumstance. Later that day, I learned the full extent of the arrests. Dozens of prominent figures had been taken, their estates seized, their families placed under guard. The city held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would there be trials, executions, or would Xerxes, in his quest for wisdom, seek a different kind of justice? The whispers in the palace shifted, the focus moving from the conspiracy itself to the king's motives. Some praised his decisive action, claiming he'd averted a bloody civil war. Others, more cynical, suggested he'd merely postponed the inevitable, driving the descent underground where it would fester and grow more dangerous. And then there were the fringe theories, the ones whispered in hushed tones behind closed doors. What if, they asked, the entire conspiracy was a fabrication, a carefully orchestrated play designed to eliminate rivals and consolidate power? What if the men being dragged away in chains were entirely innocent? The thought chilled me to the bone. It was a terrifying possibility, one that cast a dark shadow over Xerxes' actions. Had he been manipulated? Had he, in his pursuit of truth, become an instrument of injustice? History, I knew, would debate these questions for centuries to come. Scholars would pore over ancient texts, analyzing every word, every gesture, searching for clues to the truth. They would argue endlessly over whether Xerxes had saved the kingdom or plunged it further into chaos. But for me, standing there in the quiet of my chambers, the truth remained elusive. All I saw were the faces of the accused, their fear and confusion mirroring my own. And I wondered with a growing sense of unease whether justice had truly been served at dawn, or whether something far more sinister had taken place. Something that would haunt the kingdom for generations to come. The air in Persepolis hung heavy, thick with the scent of jasmine and the dust kicked up by 1,000 sandals. News, like wildfire stoked by a desert wind, raced through the crowded bazaars, whispered in hushed tones within the cool shadows of homes, proclaimed by criers in the public squares. Arrests had been made. The conspirators, those who had plotted against Xerxes, had been apprehended. The fear that had gripped the city for weeks, a fear palpable enough to taste, began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious calm. The sunscreen, that strange concoction the Romans had brought, suddenly felt less like a bizarre curiosity, and more like a symbol of a strange peace, brokered through even stranger means. The old storyteller, his voice raspy yet resonant, held his audience captive in the marketplace. His tale, however, had shifted. Gone were the whispers of doubt and fear, replaced by pronouncements of Xerxes' wisdom and foresight. He spun a narrative of a just king who, like the scorpion in his joke, acted decisively, though perhaps painfully, for the greater good of his people. He spoke of the king's inherent understanding of the human heart, his ability to discern truth from falsehood, and how he had skillfully unearthed the treacherous plot, saving Persepolis from certain ruin. The scorpion's sting, once a symbol of treachery, now represented the necessary bite of justice. But even as the crowd roared its approval, a subtle disquiet lingered in the air. The shadows of political maneuvering, the hushed whispers of backroom deals, were still palpable to those who listened carefully. The palace gates loomed, their bronze surfaces gleaming in the fading light. As I turned to leave, the air felt cooler against my skin, the buzz of the city slightly muted. Dusk had settled once again on Persepolis, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. The streets, though still thronged with people, seemed less clamorous, the underlying tension replaced by a weary acceptance. The city, like a patient recovering from a fever, slowly began to breathe again. Aurelia walked beside me, her expression thoughtful. "It's strange," she murmured, "to think that we, from a time so far removed, played even a small part in all of this." She paused, her gaze distant. "Though I still wonder what happened to those pet lizards. They were quite endearing, in a reptilian sort of way." A small smile touched her lips. "Still," she continued, "there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that even the smallest actions can ripple through time. Perhaps Rome will be just a little bit different because of what happened here today." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, replaced by a quiet resolve. The future, though uncertain, held a certain promise, a sense of a course subtly altered. The storyteller's voice, carried on the evening breeze, became fainter, his words blurring into the background hum of the city. The captivating tale of Xerxes' justice, the echoes of the scorpion's sting, gradually faded into the tapestry of the night. The bustling streets, the vibrant marketplace, the imposing palace walls, they all began to recede, their colors softening, their sounds diminishing. As the storyteller's whispers finally dissolved into the night's embrace, a quiet understanding settled upon me. Even in the midst of uncertainty, amidst the whispers of doubt and fear, courage and conviction could find a voice. The smallest of actions could have unforeseen consequences, rippling through time, shaping destinies in ways both subtle and profound. Now breathe deeply, Let these images fade and ease into the stillness of sleep until tomorrow night, when we uncover another hidden chapter from a time long ago in a land far away, but one that continues to whisper in our dreams. Good night.